Joomla configuration. In this lesson, we'll review the global configuration of your website, general maintenance information, and how you can retrieve system info about your host. Once you log on to the back end, going to your domain/administrator, you will see the quick icons. To go to your general configuration area, if you go to Site and Global Configuration. Another way you can get to the global configuration is on the quick icon on the main control panel. The global configuration has 5 different areas that you can work with: site, system, server, permissions, and text filters. When you're on the site item, there are many different site settings. You have the site name, whether the site is offline or not, and something else to note: if you're not sure of what an item happens to be, if you rest your mouse on it, a little shortcut tip will come up to explain to you what it is. There's an offline message option. This means if your site is offline, you can actually use the custom message, which you can define right here in this box. A new addition to 2.5 is an offline image. Typically, the image that was displayed on the offline page was something buried very deep on the back end in Joomla. With this release, you can actually add your own image to the offline page. The next is the default editor, the default CAPTCHA, which is also new to release 2.5, the default access level, which is the default access level, so whenever you create new content, what the access level will be for it, the list limits, and the feed email. If you scroll down, you can also see some of the metadata settings. It's a great idea to put in your site description, your keywords, and your content rights in here on the site. You can also add more information on your individual articles to make the meta words even more detailed. But it's a good idea to just get the information here for the general information about your site. On the right-hand side, you have some really exciting SEO settings, which is search engine optimization. You can turn the search engine friendly URLs on. That means it will use aliases when determining the URL. I highly recommend you turn this on. The URL rewriting really depends on the host server that you're working with. If you want to change it to yes, you need to double check with your host on if you're using Apache or IIS. If you're using Apache, you need to rename your htaccess.txt file to .htaccess before activating. Some of these other options are available too, such as adding a suffix to your URL, Unicode aliases, if you want to include your site name and page titles. And lastly, you have your cookie settings. The next option in global configuration are your system options. Be very careful about this page. In fact, I recommend not messing things up on this section. You have your debug settings, your cache settings. This part could be interesting for you. If your cache is off, it means your site may take longer to rebuild each time. If you turn it on, every time someone views your site, it will be a little bit quicker, but that also means it's taking information from the current cache of when it was last shown. Another option are the system settings and system lifetime. In the system lifetime, you can set how long you want the auto logout to occur after they've been inactive for a certain number of minutes. You don't want to set this too high. By default, it's set to 15 minutes. The next option under configuration are your server settings. Again, this be very wary about, especially the database settings. If you change any of the database settings on the right-hand side, your site will no longer be accessible. So be very careful here. On the location settings, the server time zone, I do recommend that you set it to be whatever time zone that you happen to be in. The next set of options are permissions. If you click on permissions, this is the permission settings for the different user groups. By default, you can leave the default settings here and you'll be fine. But one piece that you may be interested in is the offline access. Initially, offline access meant that if your system's offline, the person's going to get a dummy screen. Initially, only super administrators could even log into this screen and then get access to the site. But while you're building the site, you may want to have additional users be able to access the screen. Let's say you have a manager at your organization. You want them to be able to view the site, even if to the public it is offline. If that's the case, you would want to go, if you set that person, let's say, to a manager level, you would want to change the offline access to be allowed. And that means that if someone at a manager level logs on, they'll be able to get into the system. The next option are the text filters. For the text filter settings, I do recommend just leaving it as the default settings as they set up. Public, they can't enter any HTML at all. Managers may have a default blacklist. And if you're a super user, you may want to set it to no filtering at all, which means that you can put your own codes in, JavaScript, whatever you want to put in the editor, and it will save that code. When you're done editing the global configuration, you have two options. Save will save the changes and keep yourself on the same screen. If you click Save and Close, it will save the changes and it will close this screen. I'm going to click on Save and Close right now. Another item for configuration or site area information is the maintenance. Global check-in is typically only allowed for super administrators. Let's say someone was editing an article on your website 3 weeks ago. They forgot to log out, so that article is locked. When it is locked, you as the administrator could go in here, click on Global Check-in, and it will unlock that article. Just be careful when you click on this, because if you click on it while someone's currently working on something, it will kick them out. Another option here is system information. The system information page gives you information about your system, what databases you're working with, PHP settings, configuration file, directory permissions, and PHP information. This is great for if you're troubleshooting, you have questions to your host, you have questions to a component developer, they may ask information about your system. This is where you go to get it. In this lesson, we reviewed the global configuration, general maintenance, and system information in Joomla.